I am Manirathinam Rajamani from Tata Advanced Systems. You can call me Mani. Next slide, please. Today, we from Tata Advanced Systems will be presenting an overview of our approach and advancement practices towards the deployment of AS 13100 standard. Next slide, please. The presentation will briefly describe our journey in the transition process of the AS 13100 standard. We'll be sharing the Tata Advanced Systems plan, approach, and experiences gained during the transition of the standard and the applicable Aero Engine customer-specific flowdown document requirements. We will also be describing the framework, gap analysis, implementation challenges, mitigations, and practices established to ensure effective transition. Next slide, please. Before we start, I would like to give a brief introduction to Tata Advanced Systems. Tata Advanced Systems, also known as TASL, is a 100% subsidiary company owned by the Tata Group. It is one of the leading and largest aerospace and defense companies in India, with strategic business lines in aerostructures and aero engines, development of land, airborne, electronic sensors, and weapon platforms. The aerostructures and aero engines business line has developed 4 centers of excellence in metallics, composites, assembly, and aero engine commodities, and is located in 3 Indian cities: Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Nagpur. TASL has a diverse portfolio for providing engineering services, tool design and fabrication, product development related to sheet metal forming, metal and composites fabrication and machining, special processes like heat treatment, chemical processing, and many more, assembling of major aerostructures, and manufacturing, special processing, and assembly of aero engine components. Next slide, please. TASL entered into the aero engine sector as a detail part supplier in 2014 and won contracts with Rolls-Royce and GE Aviation in 2014 and 15 respectively. We joined the G22 Aero Engine Supplier Quality Committee as a liaison member in 2017. We had participated and provided feedback for the improvement in the ballots of AS 13006 and AS 13100 standards. We have also been participating in the AESQ webinars and supplier forums since 2021. Currently, TASL is working on the transition activities of the standard and the updated customer specific requirements, and we are planning to complete it well before December 2022. Next slide, please. The AS 13100 deployment framework was internally developed to systematically focus on planning, educating, executing, reviewing, and monitoring the transition activities. We have developed a detailed framework for identifying the required steps with respect to the 6M methodology. The transition activities were initiated in May 2021, focusing on understanding, planning, and deployment of the QMS, APQP, and core tools supplemental requirements. The current focus is on completing the education and execution phase of the requirements within the product development processes of TASL's QMS. Later in Q3 of 2022, we'll be focusing on the monitoring of implementation of the requirements and reporting the process compliances and its effectiveness. Next slide. For the AS 13100 standard deployment, we have adopted the AESQ's transition milestone format for planning, monitoring, and reporting the activities from April 2021. Currently, we are focused on the development and deployment of the updated procedures, process flows, trainings, software tools, and templates. The goal is to complete the activity well before 31st December 2022 and be external audit ready from Jan 2023. Next slide, please. So when we first received the AS 13100 standard flowdown through the GE Aviation's S1000 document in April 2021, during the change impact analysis, there were some common questions and challenges that were raised within the cross-functional teams that need to be answered before initiating the deployment. These included questions with respect to resource planning and allocation in terms of man, mission, method, etc. The CFT team internally brainstormed and developed mitigations to resolve these challenges. The mitigations emphasized the communication to the process owners, the importance, the relevance, and the need, and the integration method of the standard requirements to the current QMS processes without any additional efforts that would stop the process which is in place currently, along with communicating the potential transition benefits in terms of people, process, customer, and organizational requirements. Next slide, please. As many of you know, the AS 13100 standard consists of 3 chapters that are containing supplemental requirements to 9100, 9145, and the current AES-Q defect prevention core tool standards. The objective was to develop an integrated QMS and APQP product development methodology for both new product industrialization and the current production processes for improvement. The chapters were individually and concurrently studied in detail for the requirements mapping, and plans were discussed internally to determine the steps required to integrate with the current QMS system. Next slide, please. The transition approach started with the literature review of the supplemental requirements, reference manuals, and customer flow down documents. A thorough detailed study mapping of the requirements was planned and completed by the CFT team in late 2021. This study was carried out with respect to the application and integration of the standard and customer requirements within the TASL QMS system. The applicable requirements were agreed, and the action plan were created by the stakeholders for the implementation at all aero engine programs of Tata Advanced Systems for both aero engine structures and composite programs. A detailed gap analysis was planned and completed for all sites using the RM 13009 guidance template. The relevant QMS documentations were identified in the Apex QMS that would be requiring changes with reference to updating of existing standard operating procedures and quality assurance plans to enable conformance and compliance to both standard and customer requirements, and development of tools, softwares, templates for documenting, recording, and retaining product conformance and process compliance data to meet those standard requirements. Next slide, please. The AS 13100 gap analysis was done for all aero engine sites and was also extended to the identification and detailed study of the standard callouts, reference manual linkages, and notes for clarification, which I'll be showing it to you in the next slide. The requirements of the applicable clauses were brainstormed with process owners for the implementation steps. The actions for incorporating standard and customer requirements using the suggested RM guidance were also discussed in these meetings, and actions for updating process flows, implementation timelines, change requests for the procedures, trainings that need to be completed, tools, software, and audit reporting of process results were also discussed during these meetings. Similarly, the not applicable clauses also were identified and excluded in the documented information for future audit clarifications. Next slide, please. So the detailed study was identified the standard callout nomenclatures that were used in the standard to determine the requirements, recommendations, capabilities, and permissions. The study was also extended to identify additional standard callouts with respect to the documented information, trainings, audits, assessments that are stated in the standard and the customer documents. A similar analysis was done for the chapters B, C, and customer specific flow down documents and were documented for further actions. Next slide, please. Post the study, we had identified a few differences in the requirements called within the standard with respect to the customer specific flow down documents. To mitigate the identified differences, an understanding methodology was internally developed to provide recommended actions to users when there is a difference between the standard and customer specific flow down requirements. This understanding will be used internally to compare the standard and customer requirements for deployment, and it will help the process end users to identify when there is a conflict of requirement. Next slide, please. Along with Chapter A, a concurrent study was carried out on the approach of integrating the APQP methodology with the current TASL program management gated process for the new programs. The integration will support and enhance the current gated process to improve the new product development and industrialization activities. In addition, this integration will help us in streamlining and preventing duplication of processes and activities. Next slide, please. The Chapter C study identified the approach required for integrating core tool supplemental requirements with the current APQP core tool processes at Tassel. Tassel had already established the APQP core tools within its Aero Engine QMS programs in 2018, and it has been adopted as an industry best practice in the current Aero Engine production programs. The integration will support us in enhancing the current APQP core tool processes and move forward to a proactive defect prevention and improvement stage. Next slide, please. Some of the best practices that have been deployed from the standard in the PFMEA defect prevention methodology are the early involvement of customers in the process risk analysis, identification and analysis methodology for providing critical inputs such as severity ratings with respect to customer impact, identifying the impact of characteristics and their associated failure modes, understanding the linkage between design and failure modes, focusing on key characteristics, critical and major characteristic controls, deriving occurrence ratings from past MRB data on previously manufactured or similar part characteristics, and identification of features that interface, interact, and assemble with other mating parts. The PFMEA tool was also used to brainstorm with the CFT team for exploring new defect prevention and detection controls. Next slide, please. From the PFMEA, the control plans were prepared early in the development processes for all design characteristics. The emphasis is on implementing preventive control methods at the point of manufacture, like in-process probing, measurements at the in-process stages, tool life control, mistake proofing, etc. In addition, the objective is to verify the product at the earliest operation possible within the process before it reaches the final stages of the product. Further control methods like variable statistical process analysis and controls were also established at the in-process and final inspection stages, and reaction plans were automated for further investigations. Next slide, please. Some improvements that we have done and we are planning to implement in the measurement capability control are the development of templates to prepare the MSA plan and gauge R&R studies, the selection of characteristics that has to be mutually agreed between Tassel and its customers for the MSA study, including product key characteristics, process key characteristics, critical major characteristics, etc. Incorporation of characteristics within the MSA plan which have past MRB issues and tighter tolerances. Selection of instruments based on factors like feature size, tolerance, and feature type with measurement capability charts that are mapped to these instruments. And the need for application of a type 1 gauge study is also being determined where applicable. And the development of data collection methods for production process parts for gauge R&R analysis and continual improvements are also being developed. Next slide, please. Coming to external providers, some of the support activities planned and deployed at the suppliers are to standardize and simplify the supplier quality manual requirements based on the Table 1, Table 2, and Table 20 categorizations of the standard, conducting trainings to supplier cross-functional teams for deployment support, supporting the adoption of best practices both from Tassel and its customers in identifying risks and challenges to proactively mitigate in-process manufacturing defects at the suppliers, conducting periodic reviews with suppliers to monitor their performance and improvements, and integrating the AS 13100 requirements applicable based on the supplier scope to their internal audit system and as well as the surveillance audits from Tassel. Next slide, please. The trainings were planned for both practitioners, leaders, and CFT teams, which is presented in this slide. The trainings focused on creating awareness and a proactive quality culture for the AS 13100 and customer specific requirements implementation, We have also utilized the syllabuses which are provided by the ASQ team on the core tools training. The standard and customer required and suggested trainings were also mapped and conducted using an internal training plan from the leadership to the end process end user. All the requirements have been identified. The trainings will also be monitored for their effectiveness through compliance reviews and refresher trainings later post deployment of the standard. Next slide, please. Some of the initiatives taken for the effective implementation of the standard are the development and incorporation of the AESQ templates and customer specified templates within the QMS. Tassel templates were also being developed for some APQP elements like MSA plan, production capacity plan, and production preparation plan, which we have also implemented. The implementation of the APQP software with resource planning, automated predefined workflows, notifications, and status reporting that is underway. We are also working on an initiative to interlink the APQP core tools within the softwares with each other so that communication happens to and fro, and it also reduces the human effort and duplication of the processes. Next slide, please. Some of the potential benefits that are expected through the effective implementation of the AS 13100 requirements are improvements in both internal and external process communication, improvements in knowledge management, throughput and productivity, proactive early detection and mitigation of quality problems before they are identified with error proofing product and process designs, adoption of industry best practices both at Tassel and from customers for continual improvements based on monitoring of process performance, capability, and maturity. Next slide, please. Some of the lessons learned and best practices that can benefit us through the deployment of AS 13100 standard are early engagement of leadership and customers for supporting the transition activities through periodic reviews, integration of APQP and program management gated process, promoting CFT involvement for compliance and improvements to the product development process, standardizing the industry baseline requirements for suppliers helps us in meeting the basic aero engine OEM requirements, which will help us as suppliers to qualify for aero engine OEM audits. Adoption of customer and industry best practice templates for improvement of the current QMS system. And last but not least, enhanced right first time, on-time delivery and on-quality delivery confidence to the suppliers for development of new products, realization and acceptance processes. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the projected status for the transition plan with the phase-wise focus on meeting the AESQ timeline. I thank the Tata Advanced Systems leadership and GE India and global sourcing teams for providing this wonderful opportunity to present our experiences and lessons learned. I once again thank the AESQ team on behalf of Tata Advanced Systems for providing this great opportunity